about the second hour, and just want to see if I can get this cranked up. And it is not cooperating. So give me just a second here. I made the mistake of trying to get set up for you. But here's what we want to talk about in the second hour. I want to talk about, number one, the Venezuelan connections. Talk about the Russian hoax. Then we're going to talk about Venezuela. And Tamara, why don't you mention the rest of the agenda since you've got it right there? Come and just give us that real quick, and then we can get started on the second thing.
Okay, after Venezuela, we'll hear about the Department of Homeland Security and their statewide voter registration hacks that they have found. And then we go to Arizona, the 2020 hacker that took 633,000 voter records and the ensuing cover-up for that. There's a cover-up for everything. And then we'll go back to Department of Homeland Security, where they have found that nearly 700,000 non-citizens and deceased are on the voter rolls as we speak. And then up to Michigan, where there was a fake voter registration scheme and DOJ cover-up, and then we will try to get to some Q&A.
Great, right. Thank you. And I'll try to get do as fast as I can so we can get there. So that's the plan. So let's talk about how this Russian hoax was created. Now we're going to go to another level. We've talked about the Chinese Communist influence. We've talked about the U.S. intelligence cover-up. But now we're going to talk about the U.S. intelligence subversion of the American government. So go back, and again, this is all from the ODNI files that were released in July of 2025 by Tulsi Gabbard. Let's start off here. We've got some new additions to this, though. November 6th, election eve briefings do not mention Putin helping or even showing concern about Trump's election chances. December 5, the House Intelligence Committee receives first post-election classified briefing on Putin's campaign. No mention of Putin aspiring to elect Trump. The intelligence community is unanimously in agreement with this. But on December 6th, President Obama ordered a rewrite of the intelligence community assessments on Russian activities during the election. And that rewrite was led by the CIA. Keep that in mind. CIA Director John Brennan orders publication of substandard reporting on Russian activities during the election. And we're going to explain what substandard reporting is from an intelligence perspective. All right. So on January 5, this intelligence community assessment was launched to Obama. President Obama was briefed and the administration officials. And you heard everything what we just said, but yet this ICA, this new one, says that Putin and the Russian government developed a clear preference for Trump and aspired to help Trump's election chances when possible by discrediting Secretary Clinton. But there was nothing in there up until December to support that. They then briefed that to President Trump, and ODNI then released its analysis. And we're going to find out that this ICA was based on the Steele dossier. Everybody was pretty familiar with that. That was retained by Fusion GPS, who was hired by Hillary Clinton's law firm Perkins & Coie to do opposition research. That is not in the report directly, but it's there indirectly. So let's start by this whole thing that went down. So we're in January of 2017 now. Well, fast forward to May. you remember that President Trump fired James Cont, fired him for mishandling the Clinton email case. And Bill Priestap, the assistant director, and James Baker, 1 week later, approved opening an investigation into President Trump based on Crossfire Hurricane and the Steele dossier. And that investigation claimed that President Trump was a Russian asset. On May 17th, Acting Director Andrew McCabe notified the Justice Department, Deputy Attorney Rod Rosenstein, who initiated the Robert Mueller Special Counsel investigation the same day. On April 8th, 2019, that investigation was closed and no charges were brought. And then Special Counsel John Durham found in 2023, in a report that was released by the Biden administration, that the FBI had no basis to open Crossfire Hurricane in the first place. It was a fake investigation. So what did the U.S. intelligence find? In what she released, Tulsi, in July, says that they highly criticized this assessment, this new one that Brennan did. So when we're talking about this particular one, they're talking about the new one primarily, but they start off by saying the bulk of ICA judgments on Russia's election operations were sound and employed proper, but there were significant tradecraft failings cast doubt on the ICA's judgments of Putin's intentions. The assessment failed to acknowledge that key judgments on Putin's intentions were based on raw intelligence that did not meet tradecraft standards. By tradecraft standards, they're talking about CIA standards for producing intelligence report. And this sums it up pretty nicely for you. They said this whole thing was based on one scant, unclear, and unverifiable fragment of a sentence from one of the substandard reports. There were 3 altogether. One of them was Steele dossier. And that constitutes the only classified information cited to suggest Putin aspired to help Trump win. One scant, unclear, and unverifiable fragment of a sentence. The director of Central Intelligence Agency, John Brennan, overruled the CIA professionals to publish and cite that ambiguous fragment, and then mischaracterized the fragment as supporting high confidence judgments. So they were highly confident in this fake Steele dossier. It goes on. The ICA failed, and when I say ICA, I'm talking about Intelligence Community Assessment. It failed to address the existence of reliable intelligence that contradicts the report's unknown source. The ICA excluded significant intelligence that contradicted its judgments that Putin aspired to help Trump win. It disregarded Russian behavior that undermined its judgment that Putin aspired to help Trump win. And it misrepresented documents on Putin's intentions. And it goes on to say there were no reliable indications that orders by Putin to help Trump win the election were ever issued, which further makes the case for considering alternative hypotheses. The assessment did not attempt to explain Russian leaks to damage Trump that were inconsistent with the judgments that says he was trying to help Trump. That didn't make any sense, and it didn't adequately address the likelihood that Russian intelligence services had additional, possibly voluminous, damaging information on security, on Secretary Clinton, and that is related to her health. As y'all know, she was having some health problems back then. It goes on to say that, and now we're going to get into the Steele dossier, and it specifically states that the director of Central Intelligence Agency, that is John Brennan, requests from CIA professionals that the dossier be kept out of the ICA. So the DCAI request, Brennan rejected requests from his underlings that the dossier doesn't meet the standards for intelligence reporting. The assessment ignored abundant evidence that Steele's alleged source network did not appear credible. In citing it, it violated the ICD 203 tenets for proper source description. The dossier was misleadingly described using intelligence terminology that implied it was from a legitimate FBI human intelligence source when it was not. The ICA that some of the dossier was corroborated. It was not. The ICA also misrepresented the unsourced dossier as intelligence reporting of Russian plans and intention when it was not. It was just simply hearsay. And Christopher Steele has subsequently admitted that. But they couldn't pull this off completely until, if you remember, we had a new attorney general at that time. That was Jeff Sessions. Trump has now taken office, and Jeff Sessions is now the attorney general, and he would not be so likely to allow this hoax to continue if he had the authority, which he does as attorney general. So what they did was the FBI opened an investigation on May 10th of 2017 into Attorney General Sessions, claiming that he may have lied in his March Senate testimony regarding Russia. That investigation was proved the same day by Assistant Director Bill Priestap. You heard his name before. But Sessions had already clarified his testimony. There was a question about that came up from two Democrat senators, and I think one of them was Senator Leahy, I believe. I'm forgetting who the other one was right now. But so they tried to claim this, and the FBI opens the investigation, but they opened it 2 months after he'd already clarified his testimony in his March 10th letter to the chairman of the committees under which he testified. So the investigation was closed on March 8th, 2018, but it served to prevent Sessions from having oversight of the Russian hoax investigation and shutting it down when it should have been shut down. So they were able to continue that by not only investigating Trump, but they had to investigate the Sessions for bogus charges. This has all come out in the most latest intelligence documents. So I'm able to continue on. Is that correct? Okay, so I can ignore this clock. I want to move to Venezuela. This happens to be the topic in which I've got a lot of experience in. But before we start off, and voting system vulnerabilities, this is a National Council report from January 15th of 2020, and it's pretty much right on. It says that we judge that U.S. adversaries as well as non-state groups have the capability to compromise U.S. election infrastructure for the 2020 presidential election. We assess that at least Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea have the capability to access and potentially manipulate data in U.S.-related computer systems, judging from their cyber capabilities and past operations. And the availability of sophisticated computer network intrusion or attack tools on the dark web gives additional countries and non-state actors the potential capability to interfere in the election. So our own intelligence communities are saying that this is a severe problem in January 15th of 2020, and our news media is saying nothing to see here. Most everybody in the know knows that. All right, so now we're going to talk about Venezuela. And again, I'm just going to read you, for the most part, what's in the reports because they tell the story. You don't need me to tell you what they say. You can make your own decision. So it says, intelligence sources between 2004 and 2020 reported that Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez and successor Nicolas Maduro demonstrated sustained interest in electoral outcomes through the electronic voting systems, both domestically and potentially in other countries. Keep that in mind. This is in 2004 and later. In April of 2004, intelligence reporting indicated Chavez stated his objective was to prevent the re-election of a sitting U.S. president, suggesting an intent to influence U.S. domestic policies. This finding was part of the basis for the intelligence community's 2006 assessment produced by the National Intelligence Council that Smartmatic acquisition of Sequoia posed a moderate threat to U.S. national security. That happened in 2005. Keep this in mind as we go forward. CIA analysts assessed in 2006 that certain capabilities regarding electronic voting manipulation were technically possible and operationally feasible. Now they're going to show you how they do it. Specifically, that voting machines in Venezuela had unspecified AI components installed, were designed to alter vote tallies, could detect when they were being audited, that's a killer, could provide printed receipts without recording or transmitting those votes. So they have told us exactly what they planned. Now, this was 2006. The 2006 National Security Threat Assessment produced by the NIC, National Intelligence Council, evaluated Smartmatic's acquisition of Sequoia as a moderate threat based on several factors. Intelligence indicating Chavez's intent to influence the domestic policies. We talked about that. Reporting that the Venezuelan government manipulated Venezuelan national elections with Smartmatic's direct involvement. There's the key words there. Smartmatic was directly involved. We're going to come back and see why that's so critical. Intelligence that Smartmatic directors held credentials from Venezuelan intelligence services. And there were, there was known relationship problems between Smartmatic and Venezuelan. But here's the thing. When Smartmatic acquired Sequoia, Sequoia had contracts in approximately 400 U.S. counties. Sequoia was, at that time, was about the third largest voting machine vendor in America. So this assessment concluded that Smartmatic Venezuelan government manipulation makes the acquisition a potential instrument for Venezuelan officials seeking to undermine confidence in or manipulate the electoral process in the United States. This finding led to pressure from the Committee on Foreign Investment in the U.S., that's called CFIUS, that resulted in Smartmatic divesting of Sequoia. Now, that occurred in 2007. Keep those dates in mind for a minute. Remember, the original acquisition was 2005. They didn't divest themselves until 2007. We'll come back to that in a second. All right, now it's going to get even more sophisticated. Prior to the 2012 election, Chavez Intelligence Services, including his General Director of Military Counterintelligence, worked with the National Electoral Council, that is the Venezuelan election country election body, their national election body. And they worked with them and Smartmatic to develop plans to manipulate election results using pre-programmed voting machines. So here you've got the National Electoral Council, Smartmatic, and the military intelligence of the Venezuelan government working together to manipulate election results using pre-programmed. And these plans call for deploying altered machines to approximately 300 vote centers in traditionally pro-Chavez areas to ensure a victory by approximately 1.5 million votes. And then they go on to say, following the election, which Chavez won by approximately 1.6 million votes, Chavez congratulated his team for successfully implementing the manipulation plan. So they manipulated the election according to our own intelligence. Intelligence reporting consistently indicated that individuals with ties to Venezuelan intelligence services had access to election technology and voting systems. In 2012, sources reported that Chavez assigned an Army communications specialist to CNE, that was their national election body, to provide real-time access to election results. Is there any wonder why we don't want remote capabilities in our machines? Reporting from 2012 also indicates that CNN director described as a confident to head of military intelligence with expertise in voting technology, was responsible for designing protocols for auditing the voting software. Why would he be doing that? These relationships provide potential pathways for manipulation of electronic voting systems. I guess it says that right in the next sentence. The CIA's baseline of no large-scale electronic fraud occurred in 2012. 2013, the CIA had an alternate analysis that said it was in fact plausible. And the report said that it occurred that elections in Venezuela and other countries that are clients of the technology provider could be in doubt. Now, in September 2020, you're seeing they're going to get this, take this to another level. The September 2020 intelligence reporting provides the most detailed description of a specific technical approach to election manipulation. Number one, replicate digital hash files sent to the central vote counting database, mimic real voting machines that favored the ruling party, overwrite the hash files of the voting machines that favored the opposition, and make altered votes appear to originate from the legitimate voting machines. Does that sound familiar? Does that ring a bell in any way, those of you who happen to live in Fulton County in 2020? The technique would, in theory, allow the Venezuelan government to monitor and adjust results in real time during and after an election using virtual machine technology while evading detection through audit procedures. Why is that? Well, if you replace all the ballot images and then load them up, then you've got a whole new set so that it evades detection. You go and audit the corrected ballot images. This is what we have been complaining about to the Secretary of State all this time. So let's go going into there's the cover-ups. The CIA has concluded in this CIA note that we've been going through that neither Smartmatic nor Venezuelan had the capability to manipulate the outcome of elections outside of Venezuela. And then the key word there is in a predictable fashion. They didn't say they couldn't manipulate them. They just said they couldn't manipulate them in a predictable fashion. And they go on to say that they judged that the regime did not need to resort to gross fraud to win the 2020 election. Regarding 2012, large-scale fraud did not occur. But there's a few things that are missing here. So I'm hoping that y'all maybe have picked up on the same thing that I have picked up. Well, first of all, let's just talk about what's not in the CIA note. Now, understand, this note was created in June, I think the 29th of 2026. Well, there's no mention of the 2024 and 20 indictments of Smartmatic and the officials out in Miami for bribery in conjunction with the Philippine officials in regards to the conduct of the 2016 election. There is no mention of the Philippine officials grilling Smartmatic's Hyder Garcia, who now happens to work for a U.S. voting system company, over the 2016 election fraud. And of course, many of you will know there was a big deal about the Philippines election in 2016 being rigged. Well, that was Smartmatic was in control of that, and they've already been indicted here in Miami for bribery. That's not in the report. That's kind of fascinating to me. Also, what is not in the report that also fascinates me? You remember I tried to focus on the 2005 acquisition and the 2007 when Smartmatic had to divest itself of Sequoia. Well, what happened in those 2 years? There's no analysis to say, did Smartmatic install malware in Sequoia between 2005 and 2000, or all Sequoia's voting machines in malware that was given to them by Smartmatic? It doesn't even analyze that and make a conclusion one way or another. And it doesn't analyze whether or not that malware that may have been placed in Sequoia was then migrated to Dominion when Dominion acquired Sequoia in 2010. Never even looked at it. And then Tamara reminds me, well, wait a minute, it also didn't analyze what the LA County contract with Smartmatic. LA County entered into a $282 million contract for Smartmatic with its elections, for its elections since 2020, a voting system contract. None of this is analyzed in this report. I find that absolutely fascinating. So that leaves us with two conclusions. One is the Central Intelligence Agency is totally incompetent, or the Central Intelligence Agency has been involved in this election manipulation scheme all along. One of those has to be true. The audience is saying it's number two. So we are asking Director Radcliffe, we need answers to all of these questions. What is missing? We'd like to have a full accountability, and we want to stop using these corrupt, secretly counted proprietary software today. Moving on to some more threat findings. The Department of Homeland Security identified how Russia, China, and Iran, or unknown hackers, breached U.S. voter rolls or disrupted election results in 12 major incidents since 2016. And it also identifies 3 major breaches of U.S. business systems that obtaining 335 million records of personally identifying information, PII, that can be used to create fake voter roll entries, like we talked about earlier. Now, I think we discussed the China hacks, but what about hacks that weren't China? Let's move domestically. They found that the district attorney in Riverside, California, revealed that a bad actor used state voters registration website to change the party affiliation of a large number of registered voters. In California, you register by party. Well, that was kind of crazy. The Illinois Board of Elections announced that attackers gained access to voter registration data, including names, addresses, birthdates, and partial Social Security numbers. That's all PII. Back in 2016. And then also, you might remember the Kennesaw State University breach that was, or actually, it could have been worse, but that was supporting Georgia's voter registration database. But Kennesaw State University was supporting our voter registration database. It had a dual alignment authority, one to the Secretary of State, one to Kennesaw State. And it was called the Center for Election Systems. Well, they had 7 million voter records exposed, including the driver's license, Social Security numbers of registered voters. We have a whole report up on our website, voterj.org studies tab, that explains all this back in March 2017. We have went over it and over and over it. But one thing they didn't mention here, and of course it was a little bit out of their scope, was that the entire election preparation server was exposed for anyone in the world to hack and download malware to the counties without detection, because we have a single statewide implementation that goes all the way down. So you could never detect that. And that we found out later that was exposed for literally years, over a decade. That exposure exists. It was there when they first set up the center. Recently, there was an Arizona hack that was released, and they talk about a Pinal County hacker scraped over 600,000 voter registration records from Maricopa. This was in 2020. I forgot to put the date on that. FBI investigated this. They obtained a confession from the hacker, and they presented the case to 4 Arizona attorneys' offices, the Arizona U.S. Attorney, the Arizona Attorney General, the Maricopa County DA, and the Pinal County DA. And guess what the response was? We don't want to prosecute the guy. I mean, even if it was just a little slap on the wrist, he should have at least been prosecuted. They also found that over 250,000 non-citizens are illegally registered in just the 4 states for which the public data has been reviewed. And those were the 4 non-cooperating states. And I believe you can see them up there. They're California, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Nevada. They have found over 400,000 deceased registrants in only 25 states. They're still looking at this. Only 10 states have processed their full voter list at the time this was done last month. And now I'm going to get into the final thing, and hopefully we'll have a little bit of time, I think, for questions, and Tamara will come up. This is the fake voter registration case in Michigan. You may have also seen this one. I'm going to read to you out of the FBI Detroit. You've seen this over and over, how the FBI field office does the right thing. The right thing here. And they came up with this report thanks to some brilliant people who work in the Muskegon County election clerk's office. And here's the report. I'm just going to read it to you because, again, I'm not going to editorialize this. Since on or about October 5, 2020, Muskegon County Clerk's Office had received 6 packages via U.S. mail containing voter registration applications. They determined that some of the applications were fraudulent based on non-existent addresses, invalid telephone numbers, and signatures on applications not matching the Michigan Secretary of State voter or DMV records. Well, I wonder how many applications were fraudulent. I think we'd like to know that, right? Well, maybe we can find out. The Muskegon County Police Department estimates that blank delivered between 8,000 to 10,000 registrations. By the way, when I say blank, they're redacting the names of people in certain cases. So they delivered 8,000 to 10,000 registrations, of which an undetermined number appeared fraudulent. They also hand-delivered numerous applications with similar red flags. And this person was involved in similar registration drives in Detroit, Ypsilanti, Southfield, Flint, and Lansing. So if they delivered 8,000 to 10,000 registrations, most of which we're going to see were probably false, what did they do in the other 5 cities? We don't know. They were never investigated in spite of this. So the FBI did their job. They went out and they got witness statements. I think they call it a 302. And here's what it said. The witnesses admitted to all these things. People were instructed to fill out fake applications. These people were paid based on how many completed registrations they submitted each day. Others were tasked to go door to door to hang flyers saying to vote for Joe Biden. The company gave employees debit cards and loaded their pay cards on the cards each week. One of the canvassers was told that she could make up names or use anyone else's name. She would return to the office at the end of her shift and fill in enough blank sheets with made-up people so that she reached her quota. And a supervisor, that goes unnamed here, often helped fill in the fabricated applications. And the supervisor said, you can just make up the names on the form and get paid. And another canvasser said, he would just sit in his car the whole shift and would put down a name of a friend or a relative in order to have something to turn in with his clipboard. That's about as fake of an operation as you can get. However, the DOJ tries to close this case. And so on March 16th, the United States Attorney for the Western District of Michigan, and that's referred to as USAMIW, was fully informed of the facts of the case, and the USA advised that his office would prosecute. So everything was going along well. And then suddenly, he writes to FBI Detroit, he says, blank, where you're going to find out this is the DOJ, has formally advised us that no further action should be taken in this district at this time. And now, not only did DOJ inform them not to take action, but then they want to try to make it their decision. This is where it gets really interesting. So the DOJ, which is PIN, which is the Public Integrity Section, says that I understand based on previous calls with you and the United States Attorney's Office in the Western District of Michigan that your respective offices have evaluated the blank matter. By the way, this is GBI strategies. I think everybody knows that now. And you are not seeking further investigation or prosecutorial action at the time. Based on this information previously, PIN agrees. So the DOJ shut it down, and then they're saying that, oh, you concluded it, and we're agreeing with you. Well, that sets off the FBI field agent in Detroit. And when he gets this news from the Western District of Michigan U.S. Attorney, he writes to explain about the failure to follow federal prosecution of election offenses manual to the U.S. Attorney. Now, this is one of my favorite documents in the entire thing. And he goes point by point, bullet by bullet, what the manual says and what they should have done and what he's obligated to do and what the DOJ is obligated to do. I guess, I don't know if it's a he or she. And lays it right back out to them. Well, that was a little bit disturbing for them. So, but by the way, before I get to that, he goes on to say to his apparently superior, just so you're aware, I sent the below message to the U.S. Attorney last week. I haven't gotten a response. I'm not really comfortable closing the case at this point without raising these issues. I'm also not thrilled with the wording from blank stating that the PIN concurs with our decision not to pursue it, as opposed to the PIN directing us not to pursue it. So he points out the fallacy and what the PIN, how the DOJ is trying to cover it up. He says, regardless of what they believe, they still submitted fraudulent voter registration applications. Bottom line, you can't excuse this away. So the DOJ, after they get that, they relent. And they say, well, this is looking pretty bad on us. So they say, well, specifically, PIN concurs in investigating, only those voter registration applications in which the purported applicant does not exist and or appears to be fabricated, and signatures of purported applications that are the same or substantially similar to signatures on other applications. And then here's a little punchline here. This concurrence does not extend to applications featuring the names of actual persons in which the application includes a unique signature. So what they're saying there is, no, you can't do a signature match. You can go ahead and investigate, but don't check to make sure that the signatures actually match on the file. You can just say if the signatures are the same, but not that they match. Thought that was interesting. So they did this, and basically it looked like the Detroit FBI office ignored them anyway. And they put back this report that says database searches were conducted on 107 applications in an attempt to identify voter registration applications with potentially fraudulent signatures or listing non-existing individuals. The database searches reveal the following. 91 individuals returned no results in the database checks, and 16 individuals were confirmed to existing people, but only four had signatures on file that matched the signatures provided on the associated voter registration application. So 96% of those signatures were false, and actually the applications were false. That was just on one sample of 100. Now they had 8 to 10,000 just in Muskegon County, and they had 5 other cities. So if you do the math on that, if they had 8 to 10,000 to 12,000 in all these other cities each, there's 50,000 false voter registrations that were input by this single operation operating in 5 or 6 counties in Michigan in 2020. Pretty stellar. But nevertheless, despite these findings, the FBI was forced to close out the case with a report that says canvassers were not instructed to falsify voter registration information. That is in direct conflict with 302s. And no further investigation is warranted because logical investigation and/or leads have been exhausted, and the investigation to date did not identify a criminal violation. That's the official report for that investigation, and you just saw that detail. Treason, thank you. I think our audience believes this is treason, and I do too. The question is, what are we going to do about it? So let's sum up a few things, and we've got about 15 minutes for questions and answers, and Tamara's going to close us out in a prayer because obviously we need prayer for our country. So just to summarize what we have seen all along, President Trump was right. The media has attacked him unmercifully. They have tried to, imprison him, kill him, everything else because he's going to expose the corruption and the treason that exists in our country that we want back from our U.S. intelligence agencies. These intelligence agencies ran a deep state. There is no dispute that the United States intelligence officials were running a deep state shadow government to subvert not just President Trump or even President Biden or even Congress, but the will of the American intelligence agencies stole our government right from out from under our nose and trying to keep it secret. That is absolutely ridiculously horrible. And I can't, those are being polite words. So finally, we have to talk about the news outlets. These news outlets, some of them, and by the way, we got to give a shout out to Natalie Winters. Natalie Winters has identified 54 of these news sources that were in bed with the communist Chinese government against our own country. And thanks to Natalie for pointing that out. Those of you who don't know Natalie, she fascinates me because she looks like a high school, she looks like she's still a senior in high school, but she's got some of the best research I've ever seen. So thank you, Natalie, for that. And then finally, these journalists are, as Tamara likes to say, co-conspirators. They're not just complicit. They are co-conspirators with U.S. intelligence against the American people. And that is absolutely atrocious, and we need a national emergency declaration to fix this because Congress isn't going to fix it. The states are not going to fix it. We now are dependent upon President Trump to execute a national emergency declaration. Try to save this country before it's too late. And with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Tamara. We're going to take a few questions from the audience here, as well as, and of course, it has to be related to this subject matter, and as well as online. So, Tamara, do you want to start with anything online?
So online, there is so much frustration over this and over why we haven't already seen some indictments. And we understand, although we feel like that they're putting out so much information that that's got to be what they're building up to. In fact, there was more information today. We didn't bring it up because it doesn't have to do with elections, but it's bad just the same. Somebody asked in the chat if this information would go to the federal grand jury in Florida for the work they're doing.
That is a great question, and I do not know the scope of the federal grand jury I think it's in Fort Pierce, Florida. I don't know the scope. I don't know if it's there. I would think that would be a likely place for some of it, probably not all of it, maybe not the Michigan thing, but let's hope so. But we're very encouraged by that grand jury, and there's several grand juries operating around the country right now. So I'm a little patient. This was a year later than what we wanted to see it coming, but it's been absolutely devastating. Yeah. I'll take a question in here, And
Wait for the microphone. Wait for the microphone.
Oh, yeah, we're going to get
There
a
we go.
microphone.
What are the chances that President Trump is going to declare a national emergency?
I can't, no one knows what President Trump will do. I just, but I certainly would, I mean, he certainly has every right to. The evidence is overwhelming, and we as the American people are going to have to support him if he does, lock, stock, and barrel. That's why we're doing this, so that we've got to keep getting the word out and spread the word. I certainly, but I can't speak for what he may or may not do. I just think there has to be a reason for it. He's putting all this out, as Tamara said. John has a question.
So it was interesting after President Trump spoke about all that he was releasing, I turned over to CNN to see what they would say. And they said, there's nothing new here. We've heard all this before. Yes, the Chinese had access, but they decided not to do anything.
Right. And they got that from their intelligence guy who, they are employing, I forget which ones they employ, but it's either Brennan or Clapper. And Andrew McCabe, I think, is still on the payroll there. These corrupt intelligence sources who really, to be honest with me, appear from the evidence that they should be in jail. And they're using this to continue to deceive the American people. And that's why CNN is sometimes referred to as the Communist News Network.
So I have an interesting question here. Why did Smartmatic spend 2 days with Kemp? Do you know anything about that?
I don't know about that. I've heard that happened about Smartmatic and Kemp getting together, but I don't know for a fact, so I can't speak to that. But it is an interesting question. Yes, we're going to get to Mike for you.
I understood that the only way that President Trump won in 2016 was because the overwhelming amount of voters that stepped out for him. Otherwise, it would have been manipulated toward Hillary. Is that your understanding?
We have certainly heard that, and there's certainly evidence to support that. It's obviously that all of President Trump's adversaries thought they were going to win. And they thought they had it in the bag, but something went wrong. And then in 2020, we know what happened there. All the mail-in ballots came in after the election was conducted, switched it. But yes, and that's could very well be, but I couldn't say for sure, one way or another.
So there's a question in the chat. What can we do? So do
What can we
have
do?
a call to action
Oh,
for
yes.
people?
What a great question. What can we do? Please, please tell everyone you know about this. Send them the link to the presentation. Tell them that, look, and by the way, we've got a summary version that we're going to cut this down to about 20 minutes. And we'll get that out shortly. But tell them if they care about their country, they could spend an hour of their time, and we'll get it down to 20 minutes, to watch what's going on and understand what the intelligence community is doing to them. Because this is not a partisan issue. I don't care if you're a Democrat or Republican. I would think that you would not want the U.S. intelligence agencies running the country and overriding your choice. This could go both ways. So I would say, please, please, please get the word out if you're watching online today. It's absolutely critical for you to tell others about this. I'm not talking about your echo chamber on social media. You've got to get the words out to your friends, church folks, and coworkers when you can. I think there's less risk of getting fired today. So we've got another question here, and
Go ahead.
we'll get the mic to you.
I was just curious about what's going on, if you know anything going on with the FBI investigation of Fulton County
Oh,
and where that stands.
yeah, great
with their
question.
elections.
So the FBI, by the way, and I know there's many people watching online, and they know that we We filed the original lawsuit in Fulton County because we found counterfeit ballots. I was there the day that they found them. In Fulton County and at the hand count audit. Senior poll managers found them. We did put the preservation order on those ballots. That was the same preservation order we got on January 7th, 2021 that was still in play when the FBI searched the warehouse on January 28th of this year. We also had an order to unseal, but then the case was dismissed. We won that case in the Georgia Supreme Court for standing and still haven't seen the ballots. So what's the question is, what's the status now? We have the FBI, when they searched the warrants, when they searched the warehouse, they had a 5-part probable cause affidavit that was based on those parts were based on voter GA volunteer evidence that we had provided to them. It's rock solid. Media will try to say there's nothing there. We heard that already. So, but the question is, what's status right now? The status is that they are still investigating. We know that they've talked to some of our folks. I have not heard from them yet. Hope to. And by the way, if Cash Patel is watching this, we'd like to have a phone call pretty soon because we got some more information to share. Anyway, I believe indictments are coming. I really believe that. I have to, because if they're not coming, we won't have a country anymore. So, but I think we just got to be patient. I've run out of patience a long time ago, but I'm trying to keep my patience because I think we're going to get to the bottom of this before long.
So somebody asked about our getting 2022 ballots, and we have gotten some from a few counties, right?
Right. But
Yeah.
that's a kind of a Georgia-specific
Yeah.
issue. So, and we have gotten ballot images. We are constantly trying to check these results to see if they're real because they're secretly counted with secret proprietary software. And we just have to stop that. This is crazy. Secretly counted elections with secret proprietary software, and then in most states they secretly preserve the ballots. They tell us who wins, and we're supposed to believe that and accept it. I mean, what third world country would you get away with this in? It's unbelievable, but only in America. But we're hoping to bring that into an end pretty soon. Anything else? I think John has another one. While we're getting the mic up to you. Anything else in the chat? Okay, we're good. All right, we're going to wrap up. So, John, I guess you're going to get the last question, and then maybe we'll go to prayer.
So the Dominion machines seem to be going away in Georgia, and they seem to be looking at new machines. Any thing that you've looked at there, or any suggestions besides paper ballots, which would be a nice idea?
Yeah. So the problem is, I think we have to end the machines. Replacing one machine with another, you still have secretly counted elections, secret proprietary software, and secretly preserved ballots for the most part. Although we have gotten those ballots public record, but then a county wants $49,000 literally for the 2020 election ballots, or they want to wait 6 months and give it to us. So it's not a viable way to conduct elections. A simple thing to do, which we've advocated for all along, is publicly recorded hand counts at the precinct level. We have gotten the benchmark in by election night. We can have counted all the ballots. The key is keeping the precinct small and having a new staff of counters come in at 7 o'clock. And it's going to all be done and over with 100% accuracy by election night. And yet we'll have Maricopa counting ballots for 3 weeks and California for 3 or 4 themselves. But this is insane. This is insane. And I think that the only one that's going to be able to put a stop to it is President Trump. So I think that is here. So I want to ask Tamara to come up and close us out in a prayer today. And folks, what you've seen is absolutely chilling, disturbing, distraught. I don't know how many words you could say, but the problem is we're in a situation that I think only God can get us out of. And this is, as Tamara and I like to say, it's a spiritual war. This is actually just absolutely evil. It's not about right and wrong, or right and left. It's about right and wrong. So, Tamara, could you please come and close us out in the last couple of minutes?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I want to start off with a praise report, because this is the first meeting of this kind that we have had in over 2 years. Not prayed for Tina Peters to be released from prison. So please, yes. Thank you, God. We know you are a good God. We thank you that you protected Tina, and when she got out, she never missed a beat. We thank you that she is working just as hard for election integrity as she was before she went into prison. Father, this situation looks dire. It looks like, what do you do when there's those in the government that are against us, against we the people? But we know, Father, that you have a plan and you have a purpose. You have a purpose for America. And Lord, I ask you right now to give President Trump the wisdom to know what to do from now forward. We thank you for all this exposure. We've prayed for it for years, but now we ask for accountability. And Lord, we see in our eyes, it seems that only a national emergency declaration will get us out of that. So, Father, if that's your plan, I would ask that you would encourage President Trump, that you would give him the strength, the wisdom, that you would surround him with people that support him in that. Lord, only you, as Garland said, only you can do this. So we lay all of this at the foot of your cross. And we thank you that you are on it. In Jesus' name. Well, thank you for joining us today. It's been interesting, right?
Thank the WarRoom posse.
Yes, thank you, and hope to see you soon.